not even conservative Dallas escaped the hippie years. Yep, even in Texas, there was a counterculture. My dad hated everything about it. He seemed lost and confused by the events of the day, spending a lot of time mumbling about how things were going to hell in a handbasket while watching the news on TV. It was doubly hard on him considering he was a retired Air Force fighter pilot. Now at this time, I was a relatively normal teenager with really bad bangs. Inspired, of course, by the Beatles and covering my eyes as much as practicality and Dad would allow. Then I went to see 2001: A Space Odyssey at the Capri Theater in downtown Dallas, in Cinerama no less. It was nothing less than a religious experience. I couldn't believe what I was seeing or how it made me feel. It was also the final push toward what was happening to me anyway, becoming a hippie, or our preferred term, freak. It also started my underground filmmaker years. Overnight it seemed I was part of a whole new culture, complete with hand signs, hip handshakes, bizarre fashions, a secret vocabulary, and a tribal sense of belonging, all of which my dad despised. We fought about everything on a daily basis, the war, politics, you name it, but especially hair. Countless hours were spent fighting over hair. My dad believed long hair was a communist plot. And according to my dad, if we didn't stop all this peace nonsense, the Soviets would swoop down and nuke us back to the Stone Age. Memorial Auditorium, Dallas, Texas, a main hub for the counterculture, an early megachurch for the 60s rock gods. My buddy Michael and I worshipped along the other true believers and saw many of the greats, more than we can remember. Naturally, this gave us the idea to become rock gods and meet chicks. So we started the first of many garage bands over the years, practicing at my parents' place. This guy named Myron was our bass player. He had really great hair, kind of like an Apache Indian. And there was this girl hanging around that I really dug. Jenny was her name. But she seemed to have the hots for Myron. I watched her watch him and saw him flirting with her and back and forth until I was really getting jealous. Jealousy was considered very uncool. But it kept building inside me as they flirted until I started an argument with him about the tempo of a song we were playing, and he said I was crazy and didn't know what I was talking about. The tempo was fine. I said, "You're crazy." And he said, "Oh yeah," and suddenly I was flying up over my drum set and we were punching each other out. Anyway, Michael broke up the fight. I had punched Myron in the eye, but he had bloodied my nose pretty good. I stormed into the house to check the damage in the bathroom. My dad had heard all the commotion. He watched me pass through the living room, looked up with a grin, and said, "Peace." All I could do was glare at him. But he was right. Myron and I later smoked a peace pipe and agreed. The mission of world peace and universal consciousness is easily disrupted by blonde hippie chicks. There was no internet in those days, but we stayed connected and informed with Dallas Notes, the local underground press. Radical politics, concert news, local bands, gathering places, fabulous furry Freak Brother cartoons. It was all here and available in better head shops or on the street. We read in notes that the Krishna temple had a huge love feast on Sundays. Tons of free food. Free to the people. Free was a really good thing. So we drove over to the temple. Now, I don't recall if it was an actual temple per se or just a big meeting room, but I'll opt for the temple memory here. Okay, so we got there and the place was jumping. Freaks and Krishnas chanting Hare Krishna and jumping around the works. And there were tables covered with food. But a rather serious-looking Krishna lady said, "No, you can't eat until after chanting." So, what the heck? Free food for chanting? A no-brainer. We joined in, chanting and chanting. And it went on and on and on and on and on. And on and on and on. It never ended. I think they're still chanting even today. My stomach started to digest itself, so we split, bought 2 boxes of Cap'n Crunch cereal, and almost polished both of them off. Spirituality always took a back seat to munchies. We called it the Lee Park Scene. It was another major hangout for Dallas freaks. Music, frisbees, protests, all kinds of freaky activity. All under the watchful eye of the Dallas police, who at that time were not exactly freak-friendly. In those days, the police suffered from image problems, especially after reports of horseback police raids at Lee Park. Drugs weren't exactly a secret in Lee Park. In fact, they were openly hawked. Sadly, there were already ominous signs too. Junkies and speed freaks became commonplace. While pot was always the basic drug of choice, interest in psychedelics remained, high. Sorry, it was there. My buddy Michael took a tab of strawberry double dome acid once. He had a great trip, thinking he was transformed into a golden-bearded super prophet flying through space, shaking dead skin cells off his arms, which would then float next to him and congeal into tiny planets. He then began to chant, "Woodstock, Woodstock, further back," over and over and over again because he thought that it caused the world to shrink and go back in time slightly, finally imploding into a brilliant light and thus being reborn into a utopian Woodstock where peace would reign forever. There would even be concerts on the moon, Moonstock, made possible by the awesome new technology of the Apollo missions. When he finally crashed, he woke up nude in the Duncanville, Texas City jail. He had been found running up and down the street naked at 2 a.m. yelling "Woodstock, Woodstock" further back at the top of his lungs. Another buddy of mine, Gary, took a 7-way tab of green microdot acid. 7 ways. That's for 7 people. Things started out okay. The Dallas skyline glowed and pulsated, and the moon turned into a glowing fetus. Hey, he'd seen 2001 too. But somewhere on Loop 12, the trees became threatening. The fetus moon started laughing maniacally at him, and his hair turned into a nest of spiders. So he began to bang his head against a street sign until he basically scalped himself. Bleeding profusely, he saw a bright light, which he said was the portal to heaven. And then he dove straight into the headlights of a cop car. Oh yeah, he was naked too. They shaved his head and stitched him up from ear to ear, and his parents made us all come over and look at him to teach us a lesson. But it was his shaved head that really slowed the interest in Lee Park acid. The first waterbed I ever saw belonged to some chick named Brenda. She wore a lot of patchouli and strawberry lip gloss and had a great black light poster collection. She also gave me the flu a few days later. And it was at the time of the draft lottery. I lay in bed listening as they drew birth dates and corresponding numbers 1 through 365. If your number was too low, you were likely headed to Vietnam. So I lay there, feverish, as the numbers were drawn.
July 20th.
What if I was drafted? Would I go? Would I run to Canada? What would my dad say? Would I get a student deferment? Would I go to fight in Vietnam? Are you nuts, man? I could start to see my very bleak future all around me as I waited for them to draw my birthday. And then...
December 27th, 194.
Oh, right on, man. My number was high enough to be safe. We later celebrated by borrowing and rigging my dad's Air Force helmet into a bong, in keeping with the military theme of the day. The Festival Theater on Maple Avenue, the New American Cinema, my favorite Saturday night hang. Home of the first midnight movies, the underground Cinematheque. Here in this old 1920s theater, you could see a new lineup of films every week. The place was always packed, and it was always one big party. Old serials like Buck Rogers from the 1930s, followed by shorts like Frank Film or Bambi Meets Godzilla, that weird sliced eyeball thing that Salvador Dali had something to do with. Or maybe features like Harold and Maude, Pink Flamingos, and of course, Reefer Madness. After one night at the flicks, we drove out to Mountain Creek Lake. We parked and looked up at what we had nicknamed the Bulbous One. It's actually just an electrical power plant, but it looks kind of like a futuristic spacecraft on its launch pad, right out of a Robert Heinlein novel. We thought so anyway.
4, 3, 2.
So we sat near the Bulbous One and talked until the sun came up about the glorious future ahead. No doubt about it, our generation would change the world. No more poverty, racism, or intolerance, and no more war, especially wars that nobody understood. It would be a future of unlimited human potential geared towards love and peace, kinda like the movie 2001.